Welcome. If you're viewing this tutorial, it is quite possible that you are interested in a cube design project that we have at University of Richmond associated with a 3D design course. This video tutorial will go through all of the steps necessary to create a three-piece portion of cubes that interconnect to make a megacube, if you will, that resembles a Rubik's cube. If you're just getting started in SketchUp, you need to first go through the Getting Started tutorials at SketchUp.com. So please go to www.sketchup.com/learn and you'll get to this page. On the left-hand side there are a number of categories and levels of tutorials. Click on the Getting Started tutorials and then you will see, if you mouse down, 4 different tutorials. Please view and follow each of those 4 so that you will have those skills at hand when viewing this video tutorial. For each one of these, you click on one of them, for example part 1, and then view the tutorial above. You can hit play, you can rewind, scrub back and forth across the video to again see different parts of it. Here's an example of that video.
When you first start SketchUp, you'll be presented with the Welcome screen. Regardless if you are using SketchUp Free or Pro, you will need to pick a template.
Okay, enough of that. So let's minimize that screen and we'll start up SketchUp. Now we have SketchUp version 8 installed in the TLC Technology Learning Center on the 3rd floor of Boatwright Library and in a few other places around campus, notably in the education department and possibly a few other places. If you go to SketchUp.com to download Trimble SketchUp, you'll notice that they are now on SketchUp 2013. That's the new version. They're now going with the years. Nonetheless, the software is very similar. The features are the same. The main difference is that on the new version, the toolbar icons have changed slightly. Nonetheless, even if you install SketchUp on your own computer to do this project, you should be able to follow this tutorial in its entirety. So, once you start up SketchUp with a standard installation, you'll get this dialog box saying Welcome to SketchUp, and you'll see an opportunity to turn off this from appearing every time, always show on startup. And it'll also ask you to choose a template. So if you click on Choose Template, you are offered several different layouts, and basically they'll change the look and feel and also the default units. At least for the 3D design project in the 3D design course at University of Richmond, the desire is for you to use units of millimeters. This is because the project will create a design that can be 3D printed onto our 3D printers, and our printers all use units of millimeters. So as you're looking through the templates, please look for the one that says Product, Design, and Woodworking -millimeters. Select that as your template and then click on Start Using SketchUp. If you're using SketchUp on your own computer, what you may wish to do is go to SketchUp, Help, Welcome to SketchUp. Make sure that you have deselected Always Show on Startup so you don't have to deal with this dialog box every time. And also go to SketchUp, Preferences, and then down to Template. And then make sure that you have Product, Design, and Woodworking -millimeters as your selected default template. That means that every time you create a new document in SketchUp, it will be using this template, and you'll be good to go for 3D design that results in 3D printed objects. Okay, now that we have that done, you should now see the main workspace. I like to maximize it on the screen so I have as much space as possible. I also like to close any additional toolbars. Some of these toolbars you might not be used to seeing or might not be even visible on your installation of SketchUp. These two were from custom plugins that were added to make my SketchUp more functional. This toolbar is called the large toolbar, and if you make it disappear or you don't see it, you can go to View on the menu, then Tool Palettes, and then toggle back and forth Large Tool Set. Right now it's checked, showing me that, at least for me, it's visible. So you might have to turn it on right there. We'll be using that toolbar for much of what we're doing. So hopefully in the earlier tutorials you got some experience at that, as well as maneuvering around the virtual space and seeing the different axes. In this case, red, green, and blue. For those of you more mathematically inclined, they basically associate with X, Y, and Z. Oftentimes the default is that red and green axes make a plane in which it corresponds to the floor or surface of what you would be designing. And then think of blue as going upwards. And you generally want to have your space oriented such that upwards is the solid blue. So I've gone to the orbit tool. You can use O or click on the icon that looks like two circles with arrows, and then you can basically orbit around the origin or whatever surface you have centered within your display. Where you see the intersection of all the axes, that's the origin. So now we're going to begin the project. Again, you can pause and replay different portions of this video if I'm going too fast for you, and you can replay these as you need. So the ultimate goal of this project is to create something like a Rubik's Cube, a matrix of 3 by 3 by 3 small cubes, in effect 27 total cubes that are each associated with a few others within that 27 cube matrix, such that when you pull them apart you have a resulting 3 sets of pieces. So to do that, we're going to start creating one cube, and just for default we're going to make them 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters. So let's first grab the rectangular tool. I like to start at the origin. If you move your pencil over toward the origin, you'll see a yellow circle appear, and oftentimes a little tooltip saying origin. Once you have that, your mouse pointer is basically snapped onto the origin, you can then click and drag outwards to form a rectangle. I like to click and drag, and while I'm dragging and have my left mouse button down, I'll use my other hand and type in 10, 10, and you will see in the lower right hand corner you'll see dimensions, and it's typing out as I type 10, 10. What that will do when I hit the enter key is create a rectangle that is 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters. Again, millimeters are the units because I defined that within my template. So I'll hit enter, and you'll notice how it created a very small rectangle. Now I can zoom into it, and I can use my scroll wheel on my mouse, or I can use the zoom tool, the magnifying glass within the toolbar, or I can go to camera and zoom extents. And what that will do is, if I'm ever lost within my drawing, or I can't even notice that I drew something as small as 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters, I can click on zoom extents under camera, and it will help navigate me to where my drawing is. Now if I click on O for orbit, I can now orbit around this rectangle, and you'll see how the rectangle has defaulted to using the red-green plane, and that the blue axis is hopefully pointed upwards. And as I orbit around it, I'm basically doing like a helicopter flyover of this rectangle. And that should be 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters. I can always check at any point to make sure that I did the right units by grabbing the measuring tape tool clicking on it, then moving my mouse pointer until the sort of the end of the tape measure snaps to the green endpoint of a rectangle, and then I click and drag the mouse pointer until I get to another corner. Once I get to a green circle again, you'll notice 10.0 millimeters hopefully appear. If you see a tilde character, or oftentimes meaning about, a number that says like about 10 or about 10.0 millimeters, you'll know that something's wrong. What you should see is exactly 10.0 millimeters appear with no tilde character near it. You can also check the other direction, and again 10.0 millimeters. So I've now made exactly a 10.0 by 10.0 millimeter rectangle. If there's anything in error, I recommend that you just delete that rectangle and start over. Now, all we have is a rectangle. We need to actually make a cube. So the next tool we'll want to use is the push-pull tool. It starts with P, so the shortcut key is P. But otherwise, you can find it on the large toolbar looking like a rectangle with an upwards red arrow. And you'll see that when you mouse over it, you see P is the shortcut key. So I can click that or hit P, and now when I move my mouse pointer over the rectangle, you'll see how it selects the rectangle because my mouse is now highlighting that layer. And as long as you see it highlighted, meaning you see all these a field of blue dots appear while you're mousing over that surface, you can now click and drag upwards to start creating the cube. Now again, just like we did for the rectangle, we want to make this exactly 10.0 millimeters. So as I'm dragging upwards, I keep my mouse button clicked, and while I'm dragging up, I type in 10 and hit the enter key. Immediately upon hitting the enter key, it has now created the 10.0 millimeter tall cube. If I zoom out by using the scroll wheel, or again I can use the magnifying glass to zoom out, I can now start seeing the cube. In the earlier videos, you should also notice that H is hand, and that is represented by the hand icon on the large tool set. And when you use the hand, it basically allows you to pan around your image. You don't orbit around, you don't actually change the angle of the camera, but you get to move back and forth around the image. So what you want to do is get to a point where you see the entire cube. And if you want to again check on the height, you could grab that measuring tape again and check to see the height. Click and drag once you see the green circle until you get to the next green circle, and you'll see hopefully 10.0 millimeters. Again, if something's wrong, you can start over, or you can use the edit, undo, which is also Command Z for the shortcut, and that will move you back one step. In my case, one step is from when I push-pulled, so I'm back to a rectangle. But I actually had done this correctly, so I'm just going to say edit, redo push-pull, and I'll be back to the cube. Now at this point, it's very important that you create a group from this cube. We do not want to create a component, but we want to create a group. And the reason will be evident in a few minutes. So, go back to the selection tool off the large toolbar, or you also see it on the top toolbar. Come back to your cube and triple click. If you remember from the tutorials, doing a single click will select a surface or an edge. Okay? If you double click on a surface, it'll select the surface along with all bounding edges. So you'll see the rectangle. But we want to select the entire cube, so we want to triple click. So I go 1, 2, 3, triple click, and now I have the entire cube selected. Another way to do this would be to instead have your cube like this, have the selection tool, and then click and drag somewhere beyond the cube until you have the entire cube selected. Watch out, because if you have anything else in the drawing area that is now within your bounding window that you've created by clicking and dragging the mouse, those items will also be selected. Right now it's not a problem because we just have the one cube. When I let go of the mouse, I now have the entire cube selected. At this point, I can do a couple things, but in effect I want to create a group. So I can go to Edit menu and then go down to Make a Group. Another way I could have done this is, while I have all this selected, right-click my mouse, and when I right-click, one of my options that I see in the context menu is Make Group, and I'll click that. You will now notice that all the little blue dots have disappeared. We now have a blue bounding box, which happens to also be coincident with all the edges of the cube. So what this means now is that we have a group of objects. The group of objects are the 6 faces of this cube, along with all dozen edges. So the 4 from this face, the 4 from the hidden face over here, and the 4 for the connecting edges. So in effect, we have 12 edges and 6 sides or 6 faces that are now in a group. If I click off to the side somewhere, I've deselected them. Again, click back, I've selected them. Hopefully you got from the tutorial that when you double click on a group, you can now edit that group, anything that's in the group. And you'll notice that you're in the mode of editing the group because you'll now see dashed lines around a bounding box that is kind of offset in all directions from your group. At this point, the only things that you're able to edit while you have these dashed lines appearing are those edges and faces that are within that group. And all of your functions still work. If you hit O for orbit, you're now orbiting around the object. If you select pieces, you're still selecting pieces of that particular item within the group. But you're not able to edit anything in a different group while you have this one selected. Okay, so let's deselect everything so we're not seeing the dashed lines anymore. So go over to where you have nothing drawn and double click. Or you can go to the Edit menu and say Select None. Click on Select None and you won't be selecting anything any longer. Okay, so again, you can use the O key, the orbit key, for angling around your part. You can use the hand tool, or H, for panning around. And you'll want to use the select tool for when you're needing to select and or edit an object. Okay, unfortunately I need to interject something that I didn't think about until the end of the tutorial. And that is that you should be saving your file regularly. If you don't save your file and something goes wrong, then of course you'll need to start over. So what I recommend is every time you do something major, you save a version of the file. And to save the file, while you're working within the SketchUp, you go to File and then click on Save the first time, and then after you've saved it once, then you should do Save As for subsequent versions that you'll be saving. So you'll hit Save the first time, and it'll ask you for a file name and a location where you want to save it. And then the next time, just Save As, and hopefully put it in the same place. And the way I've been doing it is I save the file with my name or net ID and what version it is. And so you want to do that every once in a while. What we want to do at this point is zoom out far enough that we can now comfortably create the matrix of all 27 smaller cubes. And we're going to align them to each other. So it'll be very important that you follow these steps because we need to have these exact. All of these small cubes have to be touching exactly with each other. They actually need to snap to each other, which means that they're exactly connecting. The reason why is because if there's a slight gap between some of the cubes, they will not be able to print correctly and you'll have a failure of your project. So please follow these next steps exactly. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit farther and again select this one cube. I'm going to go to the Edit menu and copy. Now I'm going to say Edit and Paste. And you'll now see another cube appear. Now this is where it becomes a little bit more challenging. The new cube is going to be moving around the surface with your mouse pointer. As soon as you click it, it's going to place that cube. And I can guarantee that the way you have SketchUp oriented, it'll look exactly like mine. So what I'm going to just say is click somewhere, and that's going to place it. And now we're going to want to move this cube so it is exactly touching this cube and is sharing one face. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and the way we can make these cubes exactly touch each other is by moving them. You'll notice that once I placed it, it automatically selected the Move tool for me. If it doesn't select for you automatically, you just go to the large toolbar or the one at the top of the screen and look for the 4 arrows that look like a compass rose on a map. Click that and you have the Move tool. Then what you're going to want to do is move the Move tool until the center of the Move tool is on one of the corners of this cube, such that you can imagine yourself dragging that corner to lie exactly on top of the same corner or the associated corner from the original cube. So I'm imagining that if I click and drag right here while I have this corner selected, and you see how the tooltip says endpoint and group, and you see that purple circle, when I click and drag it, I have a direct path that I can make with the mouse such that when I let go of the left button, it will leave the corner of this new cube exactly where I have selected now, which is the corner of the original cube. So let's go ahead and do that now. Go to the new cube. Again, get the purple circle appear. Hopefully you should see endpoint and group. At this point, click and hold down the left mouse button, and you should now see this cube move around. You're going to see it occasionally jump, and what you should see is that from where it started, whatever distance you are now traveling around the screen, occasionally as you rotate around the screen, you're going to see, like right now, the green axis appears for a dashed line that goes to my cursor. If I move over this way, you'll see a red one when you get to a snapping point. And this means that if I let go right now, it will have moved that new cube along that red axis. Or if I go towards vertical, I get eventually to a point where it says I'm moving the cube along the blue axis. Well, I don't really want to go along any of the 3 axes. I want to go to a point where the corner that I have selected will snap to the corner of the original cube. So I start moving it closer, and you see at one point it started snapping against that face. So it really wants such that if I let go of the mouse button now, at least the 2 faces will be touching. However, it's not going to be exactly what I want. I want to move it until my corner is actually touching and I have selected the other corner. You'll notice as I get closer and closer, there'll be a point where the 2 are touching. And you'll notice this because the edges of my selected box or cube are exactly the same ones as for the original cube. And you'll notice how the cube, how I have selected the purple circle from the original endpoint on the original cube. So I'll just do it again. I'll start coming in from this direction. You'll just get to a point where they just feel like they snap. If this was a real thing that you were touching, it's almost like magnets. Once you get to a certain distance, they are exactly touching. You don't want it slightly off like I have right now. You really want them touching, and you'll see right when it snaps, you get this big sort of like a gravitational force, and they touch each other. And then you want to let go of the mouse button right then. Okay. Now, if you're unsure whether it actually truly made it connecting with the other one, here's what I recommend you do. You can zoom in until you're really, really close on that vertex, that corner between the 2 cubes, and look to see if there's a little gap or an overlap of some kind. You could use the orbit tool to kind of walk around it and see, gosh, no matter how far I zoom in, they really look like they're touching. Another way you can check is by zooming out using the hand tool to get to some perspective again. And once you see the two cubes, use that tape measure, the shortcut is T for tape measure, and select two of the corners. So one corner from the old cube and one corner from the new cube. And if they're exactly touching, you should see 20.0 millimeters. If it says approximately 20 millimeters or 20.1 or 19.9, you didn't quite do it right. Okay, so it should be exactly 20 millimeters. If you have a problem, what you just do is select that new cube again, move it off to the away. You can use any corner to touch on and move it to the away from the other one. And again, grab the purple corner when your mouse is over it and drag it towards the first cube. And again, wait until it snapped to the first cube. Then again, take the tape measure tool and measure that you've got exactly 20.0 millimeters. Okay? If you're also unsure in the other direction, you could try a second set of corners, and if you see 20.0, you know that they're touching correctly. Okay, now we have two cubes and we're going to try to get to 27. So we're going to do this one time to get one entire row, a row of 3 cubes. So I still have it in the clipboard, so when I hit edit, paste again, I will get another cube up here. Now again, I'll zoom in, get until I can see these 2 cubes, because I'm just going to make one row of these cubes. And I'll grab this corner, drag it over to the corresponding corner over here, wait until they snap, and then let go of the mouse button. And now I have a row of 3 cubes. Again, I can check the measurements, whether I did it correctly, by getting the tape tool with T, go from one far corner to the next far corner, and I should see 30.0 millimeters. I can check another one, 30.0 millimeters, I did it correctly. Now, again, we need to make a megacube of 27 of these smaller cubes. Now we could just keep pasting, but we're going to get kind of tired doing this. So instead of pasting individual smaller cubes, I'm now going to copy and paste the entire group of 3 cubes. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to change to the pointer tool, select all 3 cubes, now hit edit, copy. And at this point, my clipboard now has 3 cubes that are going to be copied and pasted. When I hit edit, paste, you're going to see another set of 3 cubes, and they're probably not going to be in a good orientation for dragging and dropping to be touching the other 3 cubes. So let's just drop it where it is, however it is, and we're going to want to orbit around until we get to a point where we can see the 2 corners that we're going to want to touch. So I want to use this corner and this corner. So let's grab that move tool. Hopefully I still have these 3 cubes selected. If not, you can just select them with the select tool. And I'm going to want to zoom in until I see in large space, zoomed in, this corner that I'm dragging from and this corner that I'm dragging to. Move my mouse until I am now over that purple circle of the corner of the one set of 3 cubes, and I'm going to click and drag over to the other corner. Once I get close enough, they again, just like individual small cubes, I now have a point where they snap all 3 cubes to the original 3 cubes. And as soon as they snap, I can let go, and they should be exact. If I'm unsure of whether I did that quite right, I can use the T tape measure again and measure. In this direction, I should have 20.0 millimeters exactly. And if I do in the other direction, I should see, again, an exact measurement. In this case, it's 30.0 millimeters. So you might want to check a couple of those, make sure I'm doing it quite right. 30.0, and if I do over this quarter, 30.0, or sorry, 20.0 again. I should see 20.0. So now I'm going to want to paste another row of these sets of 3 cubes. So then I'll have the whole layer at one level done. I'll have 9 of the cubes. So let's do that again. Edit, paste, and you'll see another group appear. Now I actually have it such that the mouse has the corner selected of the set of 3 cubes. So in this case, it just happens that I can probably just get by with clicking and dragging or continuing to move the mouse pointer until I have the corner of the original set of 6 cubes selected. But even if I didn't, I can just, again, like I've done previously, just hit the mouse button and leave the cubes here. Make sure I have the move tool selected and have all 3 cubes selected. Move the mouse pointer until I'm on the corner. I see the green circle, or the purple circle, and I click and drag it over until they snap. Then I let go. I'll zoom out a little bit, maybe use the hand tool to come in and pan a little bit. And then I'm going to use the tape measure to again check to make sure I have 30.0 millimeters in this direction and 30.0 in this direction. And I'm good. Now I have one entire layer of the Rubik's Cube created. I'm going to want to do this now 2 more times. I don't want to do just, again, a column of 3 of them. I want to do all 9 of them, and that'll again speed things up. So I go back to the select tool, click so I'm not selecting anything, and then I'll click and drag so I'm selecting all 9 cubes. Then I'll hit edit and copy, and now when I say edit paste, I'll have another set of 9 appear. Now it happens that I'm able to put them onto a second layer directly on top of the first one because it had already selected the corner of this new set of 9, and when I drag it around I'm able to get an orientation such that they're going to create the start of the Rubik's Cube. So as long as I can get the 2 corners touching and that it snaps so that they're exact, I can click my left mouse button and leave them all here. At this point, I should now have 18 cubes, and they should all be exactly oriented relative to each other. I can click, so I deselect them all, use the tape measure, and I can just check myself, make sure that it's 20.0 millimeters vertically. There should be no change. It should still be 30.0 in this direction and 30.0 in this direction. Because I was working on the 2 layers, it's really just important that I check the corners, like here and maybe here, to make sure I see 20.0. Now, I have one more layer to go. So let's do this one more time. Edit, paste, and I'll have one more layer of 9 cubes. And just like before, I happen to have it oriented that I can just simply do this. And so once the mouse is over that corner, I can click and leave the additional 9. Deselect again, hit the tape measure tool, and I can go from one corner downwards to the other corner, and I should see 30.0 millimeters. If anything went wrong, I can hit edit, undo, paste, and do that layer again. And just like I've said previously, if I have a problem and I don't think I'm going to be able to do the snapping thing, I can just leave those 9, orient to another axis, make sure I select those 9, or if I have to start again, I get the selection tool and I just click and drag so I have all 9 selected. Hit M for the move tool, and then find a corner, wait until I have a purple circle, click and drag until I can then put it on top of the others. Again, wait until it snaps to the other corner and then let go. Use the tape measure again to check, make sure everything is correct, 30.0, 30.0, and we're good. Now at this point I didn't mean to do that. Now at this point we can hit the select tool, deselect everything, hit the O tool for orbit, and just check to make sure everything looks right. You should now have a Rubik's Cube of sorts, and each one should have a group of a smaller cube. So when I click on any one of these cubes, I'm selecting the group of faces and edges that represent these smaller cubes. Now's the potentially fun part, where I can choose to make 3 pieces that will fit together to form this supercube or megacube. So what I want to do is start fashioning these 3 sets. And the way I'm going to do it is use color to help set apart the different pieces. Now with the University of Richmond's first 3D printer, and the one that we'll probably be using, your 3D printed cube is all going to be one color. All 3 pieces will be a single color. But at least in SketchUp, we can tell them apart by having 3 different colors. So what I'm going to want to do is hit the select tool and hold down the shift key, and when I hold down the shift key, my cursor is now changed to also show a +/-, which means every time I click on something, it's going to add or remove that from the selection. And I can toggle anything back and forth. So I can click on this cube or click it again to deselect it. And basically, while I'm holding down the shift key, select as many of these cubes as I will want to have in this mega cube. Do realize that when you make the 3 sets of cubes, all the smaller cubes need to have touching faces with other small cubes that will be part of that same mega piece. If they're only joining by corners, it's not going to work. I'll try to show that what will happen in a minute. So I have 4, 5, I have 6 of these smaller cubes selected so far. Now, if I select, let's say this, hold down the shift key again to add in another piece. And if I select this one, you'll notice as I orbit around while these are selected that in effect this new cube that I selected is only going to be sharing one edge with this cube. It's not going to be sharing a face. I can kind of highlight that just for this tutorial. I don't want you to do it, but just to highlight the issue that we have by moving the selected pieces outwards. If I made a mega piece with all of these smaller cubes, you notice that this new cube is only going to be touching edges with the rest of the body. That's not going to be good, because when we 3D print this, it's actually going to 3D print this as one piece and the small cube as a separate piece. So we really can't have it that way. I'm going to hit Edit, Undo, so I get back to my pristine cube here, pan back. And so I'm not going to want to select that one cube unless I select some other pieces with it. So I go back to my Select tool, hold down the Shift key so I can continue adding or removing pieces. So for me, I'm going to deselect that. I don't want that to be part of my cube, my mega piece. I'm going to select this one instead, and I am going to color all of these pieces. At this point, I use the fill, the bucket tool with a B, a bucket tool, but it's kind of like the fill from Photoshop or some other programs you might be familiar with. So I grab the bucket tool and I can pick some colors, a color. Don't care which one. Let's just say something towards the red. Make it a pink. And now when I paint the selected cubes, all the faces of those selected groups should appear now. Okay. Now at this point, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and let's drag this tool out of the way a little bit, but keep it appearing. I could move to this point and actually start detaching this mega piece from the others. So while I have them all selected, I'm going to hit the Move tool. Again, M is the shortcut, and I'm going to go to a corner, and I'm going to drag the pieces away. Now to make it exact, my preference is that as I'm moving it, I am moving in the direction of the red axis or green axis as highlighted by that dotted line as I'm dragging. I don't want to go black I want to either be green, so I'm going along that direction, or even blue going upwards, but I'd prefer to keep it on the floor, keep it on the surface. So I want to move it along the green or red axes. So I'm moving towards the red axes. The reason I do this is because now when I hit orbit, I can still see that at least part of this red or pink cube is on the floor, as evidenced by the green and red plane. As I'm dragging around with the orbit tool, you'll see that one face of one of the small cubes on the pink mega piece is on the surface. Okay, now I've got some remaining cubes here, and I'm going to need to create 2 more mega pieces out of this assembly of smaller cubes. So I'm going to go ahead and pick some more pieces. So go back to the selection tool, grab a few more, grab at least one, hold down the shift key so I can grab a few others. Oh, let's do these. Now I'm going to drag these to the right, so I have them all selected. Actually, let's first color them, just make it easier. So I'm going to make these a light green. So I use the color palette and I picked a green. And now when I go over to the selected pieces, I can just click and they will all get painted. Now I'm going to move them. Hit the move tool, pick a corner. Again, you need to pick corners when you're moving them to get them to move accurately. You can click and drag along the middle of a face, but I recommend strongly that you use a corner to do it. So once you get a purple corner, you start clicking and dragging. Again, you want it such that the dotted line that appears is red or green, not black. And you'll notice as I go along the red axis exactly, it's a red dotted line. It's hard to see because it happens to lie on the exact same line as the red axis, but then you know that it's working right. And again, they snap, so it should make it pretty easy to do. So once I let go of the mouse button, it should leave this along the red axis. Now, if I zoom out a little bit, hit the O key to orbit, you'll now see that I've got 3 sets of cubes, and 2 of them are colored, the third one isn't. I can fix that by hitting the select tool, deselecting everything, orbit around to the point where I know that a bounding box that I create will just go around those white cubes. I hit the selection tool again, I create that, and I go to upper left corner, click and drag until I can select just those 9, or just those cubes that are in the center there. Let go, and once I have them all selected, I can pick another color, let's say in the blues, and when I click, all of the new pieces should be blue. So we now have 3 mega pieces, if you will, each made up of some smaller cubes. Now, we're going to need to do a few more things before they're ready to 3D print. At this point, these 3 sets of cubes are all set uniquely to each other, but they're not going to necessarily work very well on a printer. The way our 3D printer works, we're going to need to optimize some characteristics of these 3 mega pieces such that they will print well. We need them all to be on the same surface. Now they all happen to be sharing the red and green plane, so you can say that the red and green plane is the surface for the plate or bed of the printer. However, when printing these, they're not going to print quite optimally, meaning that whenever there's an overhang, like let's say look at this red cube, think of these like buildings. If this red part was a building, this red section here is cantilevered outward. It's kind of like there's no first floor underneath that red cube, but then you've got the second floor, and what's going to happen is the printing isn't going to work very well because there's nothing below it. Printing works best, if at all possible, that we have minimized the amount of these overhangs or cantilevered areas. So as we zoom back, you're going to see that with the red set of cubes, there's a bunch of these problems. I'm going to just use the selection tool. That's going to be a problem because there's nothing under it, and this one's going to be a problem because there's nothing under it. And we can reorient this mega piece in such a way that it will print better. I'll show that in a minute. We look over here at the green cube, the green mega piece, and again this piece has nothing underneath it. And let's just pan over to it and zoom in a little bit so you can see it more clearly. You'll see that it's kind of like the third floor for a building, and there's nothing below it on the first and second floors. So there will be a problem printing that one. Also, we have another problem that appears. Over here, there's a cube that is like the third floor. There's no second floor underneath it, but there is a first floor. So this can cause a problem as well. If we now pan around and look at the blue section, there's no problem with my blue section until I turn it around and get over here on the back side. And notice, let's go back to the selection tool. When I select this cube, you'll see that there's nothing underneath it, what would be the first floor. And so that's not going to be quite optimal. So this is going to take some deductive reasoning and some optimization on your part. Your three cubes mega pieces are going to be different than mine, but these are the general rules that apply, and the steps that I'm going to go through to try to optimize the orientation for these pieces will apply to yours as well. So in my case, as I look at the green cube, we're going to start off with the green section. I'll deselect everything by hitting the select tool and either hitting edit, select none, or just clicking off somewhere in the gray area. I'm going to get to a point where I can look around at this green piece. Now you'll notice that as I look around here, there is at least one, in fact there's one orientation, one way I could rotate this green mega piece to a point where it will have no overhangs or cantilevers. And it turns out that if I rotate this clockwise from the viewing angle right now, and you'll see sometimes this happens where you'll see these dotted lines. These are called guides, and they sometimes appear if you've been using the measuring tape tool. If you want that to disappear, go to the edit menu and hit delete guides. It will not delete any of your parts, faces or edges. It'll just delete those extra dashed lines that you have around. So at this point we can zoom in, and if you look at this green mega piece from this direction, you'll notice that if I rotate this whole thing, kind of pivoting around this bottom block and bring this whole section, rotating it to the right clockwise, I'll get to a point where these faces on the right side that look darker green right now, those will be on the bottom or the red-green plane. And when I'm oriented that way, you won't see any more cantilevers. So if you don't see it now, hopefully you'll see it as I work on it. So what we're going to want to do is get to a point where I can select all of the green cubes and any of the hidden ones behind them without selecting any of the blue or red cubes. And right now I've got it set. So I'm going to go up to a corner, click and drag the select tool until I have the bounding box around all of the green cubes. Let go, and they're all selected. Now I'm going to want to use the rotate tool. Now you need to be very careful. We only want to rotate things by 90 degrees, 180 degrees, or 270 degrees. If you rotate something 89 degrees or 45 degrees, it's not going to print right. So we need to do this exactly. Rotate them exactly 90 degrees, and then that'll make this vertical face into a bottom face for the assembly of mega pieces, and it'll print right. So while I have all these selected, I want to change to the rotate tool, and you'll see it down here as the two kind of circular arrows, and you'll see rotate with the letter Q. I could use the Q as the shortcut key or just hit it on the rotate. Then when I bring my mouse over, and you'll start seeing a protractor appear, and hopefully in the tutorials you've already seen how to use this tool. What I want to do is move it until the center or the purple section of the rotate tool is on top of and snaps with the corner that I'm actually going to be using for the rotate. Again, I'm rotating this entire set of green cubes to the right, so I actually want to have this corner selected because it is currently the bottom of the mega piece, and in the end, if you can visualize this, as I rotate it 90 degrees, this same corner is going to be on the bottom. Now I'm rotating around the red axis, so what I should see is when that protractor becomes red, that is the right color for me. I want to have the purple circle selected, so I'm rotating the corner of the cube, but I also want to have it red, showing that I'm rotating around the x-axis. Once I have both of those two things happen, I stop moving the mouse or the touchpad, and I very quickly and lightly click the corner, or left click. And when I left click, now you'll see that the protractor is fixed. And at this point, as I move the mouse around, it's rotating the protractor around. Basically, I'm now picking the angle to which I'm going to be rotating. Now, I'm just going to come over here to this other corner. Again, it's best if you use exact corners. So I'm going to go over to this corner, wait until I have the purple circle, and I'm going to click on the mouse or the touchpad again. At this point, I now have that point set as well. Now when I start mousing, you're going to see it starting to rotate the entire mega piece. And as I rotate around, it's rotating it freely. But I don't want it to do it freely. I want it exactly 90.0 degrees. And you'll notice that when I get close to 90, and you'll see 90 appear, or the angle appear in the lower right corner where it says angle. Right now it's 95.0. As I start getting towards 90, it's going to snap to 90.0. If you see 90.0 exactly, you can click on the mouse again and it's set. Now let's undo that just so I can do it again. Again, purple circle in the corner, wait until I have the red protractor, click once. Now I set the point that I'm going to be actually rotating by picking something along that edge. Wait, just do it when I have a purple circle. Click again, and now it starts rotating. Now I could go until it's exactly 90.0, but I could also just stop like while it's here at like 54 degrees. And if I type in 90, you'll see that appear in the lower right corner. And when I hit enter, it's going to go exactly to 90.0 degrees. Okay, we'll be doing this a couple more times so you can get some practice with this. So let's zoom out a little bit, O for orbit, and you'll notice now that I've got, again, this red-green set of axes, which becomes the floor. Kind of like this is a perspective of a city skyline. You'll see the three buildings, and you'll see when you pan around the green section now, you should see that none of the smaller cubes require an overhang or cantilever. So that's exactly what we want. We want it oriented to minimize, or in this case, eliminate the overhangs. So now we need to do it with the other faces, or the other mega pieces as well. So I go back to the select tool, and I start working on the blue tool, the blue one. Again, the blue one has one cube that's going to be a problem. That's the one that's right here, dead center, because there's nothing below it. So I'm going to want to think about how I can rotate it such that there won't be any overhangs. If you look, the back side of it, in this case, I've got 8 cubes over here, and that can be the floor. So in this case, if I rotate this entire mega piece to the left or counterclockwise 90 degrees, I won't have any overhangs. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, I need to have the entire blue section selected. If I didn't have it already, I can go to the selection tool, click and drag. So I'm only highlighting the blue pieces. I don't want any of the green or red pieces within that bounding box. When I let go, all of the blue cubes are selected. Now I want to orient it so I can see clearly what I'm doing. I'm going to be rotating around this corner right here. I'm going to be going the left 90 degrees. So while I have them all selected, I use the Q rotate tool, come to the corner. Again, I want the purple circle to be in the corner, and I don't want the green axis. I want to rotate towards the left. And if you look in the background where I am right now, you'll see parts of the red axis. That's back here and back here. So I know that I'm going along this line of the blue megacube, and that is the same angle as the red axis. So what happens is I want to go to this corner, but instead of the green axis or the blue axis showing, I want the red axis. And if you're careful enough, you can move the mouse so finely that the purple stays in the corner, but you're going back and forth between the red, green, and blue axes. If you're able to do that, you want, like in my case, I want to get so it's red. Now I was able to do that. Have the purple corner selected and the red protractor. However, in some cases that might not work for you. So here's another way to do it. You move your protractor until the center is in the purple circle in the corner that you want. And then, no matter what color you see, red, green, blue, or black for the protractor, you click and drag the rotate tool. In my case, I want to do it towards me. And if I do it towards me, I'm going along the red axis, and it knows I want the red axis. Now, while I'm still clicking and dragging the mouse button, you'll notice as I rotate, the protractor will become black at some point. More to the left, it snaps to the green. Now it's green. If I rotate and snap upwards, it becomes blue. All while I'm still holding the left mouse button down. I don't want red, or I don't want green or blue or black. I want red. So again, I start dragging towards me, and at some point it becomes red. Once it becomes red and I still have the purple circle, I know everything is good, and I can deselect or unclick, if you will, the left mouse button while I've been dragging it. Once I let it go, now the protractor is fixed. Again, just like before, I need to select a point to start rotating from. And so I'm going to go along this face of the blue megapiece. Again, wait until I have a purple circle, and now click again with the mouse. At this point, as I rotate the mouse, now it's fixed as far as one axis of this blue megapiece. And I want to rotate towards the left, so I'm kind of going towards the left. And again, I can wait until it snaps at 90.0 degrees, or I can type in 90 degrees or 90.0. And when I hit enter, it's going to fix it that it rotated at those 90 degrees. Now, just to check myself again, I'll hit the orbit tool, and as I rotate around, you'll see, look underneath, look around the blue megapiece, and there are no overhangs for it. Every smaller cube has a cube below it, or the cube at the bottom is on top of the green-red plane, which is the floor of my drawing. I want to do this one more time with the red. Come over, pan over till I have the red megapiece selected, or at least in the center. And I use the O orbit tool to pan around it. Again, I've got a case where I've got some overhang. These two cubes, smaller cubes in front of me, are the ones that will have an overhang, and I don't want that to happen. So hit the select tool, deselect those blue megapiece smaller cubes, and I'll be ready to start moving around. I could pan a little bit so the red is, or the pink is centered. I can zoom in a little bit, hit the O to kind of get to a point where I see what I'm doing. And if you've been following me and perhaps even going ahead, you'll notice that if I orient the red cube this way, and if I rotate counterclockwise, these darker pink faces here will become the floor. And if I do that, rotate this 90 degrees to the left, I will have no overhangs at all. So let's go ahead and do that. Select the select tool again, select all of the red smaller cubes, orient it if I need to, because I know I want this corner in the lower left and I'm going to rotate around that corner. I grab the rotate tool, Q, or the two red arrows. I move until I have the purple circle appear for what should say endpoint and group, or what is the corner. I don't want blue. I want to rotate around the green axis. So I should see a green protractor. Again, if I don't, what I do is I wait until I have the purple circle, and like right now it's wrong. It's not, it shouldn't be the blue protractor. So what I can do is click and drag the rotate tool towards me, towards the green axis. And when I get to the green axis, I get to a point like right there where it's snapped to rotate along the green axis. As soon as I see the green protractor, I can let go of the mouse button, and now it's fixed. So it will rotate around the green axis. Now I need to pick a point to rotate around, and so I pick something along that bottom face, make sure I've got purple showing, click, and now when I drag the mouse around, it's going to move the entire pink mega piece again. I want to move it to the left 90 degrees, so I can either wait until I get exactly to 90, or again type in 90.0 and hit enter, and it did it exactly. Now we've got some progress. If I zoom out, pan around a little bit, orbit a little bit, you'll now see that all of these buildings, if you will, these mega pieces, they're all sharing the red-green plane, which is like the printing bed of the 3D printer. Now there's one more thing that we need to optimize. We've got these three sets of mega pieces, but they're not really close together. We need them much closer together so they will fit on the print bed of a single print job, meaning all of these three pieces will print at one time. What we need to try to do is get all of these three mega pieces together such that they're going to be less than 70 millimeters, or about the size of 7 of these smaller cubes in both the green direction and the red direction. So what do I mean? Right now this red piece is 3 blocks in the green direction and 3 blocks in the red direction. This green one is 3 blocks wide in the green direction, red direction, and 3 in the green direction. Same for the blue, 3 in the red, 3 in the green. We need them all to fit in as small of an area as possible. So we need to move them closer to each other. So this is also an important thing, because in the end we need them all to be still at sharing the same bottom of the print bed. They all need to be exactly on the red-green plane. If one of them is as small as 0.1 millimeters up or even 5 millimeters up, they're not going to print right. They all have to be exactly with each other. So you need to follow me a little bit more. Okay, so to move the parts closer together, we'll be selecting all the parts of one mega piece and moving it closer to the others, and again for the other one. In general, it's best if we can get all three to be somewhat close to the origin if possible, but most importantly, they all need to be at the same height. So let's go ahead and do that now. So get to a point where you can see all the parts. Let's hit the select tool. You can do edit, select none, or again click somewhere in the gray area, and then click and drag a bounding box around one of the sets of pieces, one of the mega pieces. Then hit the M for move tool, and you want to click and drag off one of the corners, one of the bottom corners of your part, meaning one of the corners that is along the bottom face of the mega piece. That should be on the red-green plane. So let's click on drag that corner, and you'll notice, again, like we've talked about before, as you move parts, you'll see at one point, depending upon the orientation of your dragging, it will be along the red axis, or green axis, or maybe even blue axis. And you'll see kind of the blue axis is like an elevator. It's going up or down. but we really want to go along the red axis. One way to help that out is while you're clicking and dragging it, once you see the point at which it's, in this case, red, you'll see red dotted lines. When I snap to that point, as it's dragging back and forth, while I'm seeing the red dotted lines, hold down the Shift key. So just to remind you what's happening here is I had selected all the pieces from the red mega piece. I clicked and dragged the move tool along one of the corners so that the whole thing is moving. Now, while I'm still clicking and dragging the left mouse button, I hold down the Shift key. So it takes a little bit of dexterity to do this. You're moving the entire red mega piece. Your left mouse button is clicked downward and you're still holding it downward as you're moving the pieces. And now you're also holding the left shift, well, one of the Shift keys. What now you should see is that the red dotted lines are now bold. They're thicker. And this means that your movement is now constrained along the red axis. While I'm still clicking and dragging and moving the parts, and while I'm holding down the Shift key, there's no ability, even as you see my mouse pointer is now moved way off towards the green or blue direction, it's only moving the red mega piece along the red axis. We want to constrain all of our movements of these pieces now along the red or green axes, and that will keep all of the pieces at the same level. So now while I'm clicking and dragging, I move it closer and closer to the blue mega piece. I don't want them to touch, I just want them close together. Okay, and I'm going to stop right now. At this point I can let go of the left mouse button. I can still hold down the Shift key, which means during the entire movement it was constrained to the red axis. So I want to still hold down the Shift key and just let go of the left mouse button. At this point, as I zoom in and rotate, or orbit, I should say, orbit around, you'll see that the pieces are still on the floor. That is the red-green plane. Okay, but now the piece has moved very close to the blue piece. Now if I was to measure this in this direction, these two pieces, the red and blue pieces, together are about 1 square, 2 square, 3 square, 4 square, 5 squares wide. So 5 wide. I've got 3 vertically, like along the green axis, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's about 6 vertically. So these two pieces are well within the ability to print on a single 3D printer print job. But I still have this green mega piece to deal with. So let's take a look at that. I'll zoom out a little bit again, maybe pan around so you can see all the pieces. And so this is a complex piece. I'm going to need to move this over here as best I can. Looking at the orientation, it's probably going to be I'm probably going to need it to move it along the red axis and then the green axis to get them close together. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll hit the select tool, create a bounding box around the green mega piece until I have all the pieces selected. Hit the move tool, go down to the corner and start dragging it. Just like I had shown you before, as I drag it along the red axis, you'll see red dotted lines appear. While I'm still clicking on the left mouse button and dragging it, once it snaps to that red line, I'll want to hold down the Shift key. You'll see that the dotted lines become thick. Now no matter what I do, it's only going along the red axis. I want to get to a point where it's pretty close to the red but not quite touching it. Okay, now let go of the left mouse button and then the Shift key, and we know that it's still constrained to the red-green plane. Let's now orbit until we have an overhead view, and you'll see we've now gotten really close this way, but we need to get it close this way. So let's now change our direction and start moving this green mega piece along the green axis to get closer to the blue mega piece. So let's turn this around this way so we have a better view of what we're trying to do. Again, I want to select one of the corners that's down at the red-green plane, so one of these lower corners of the green mega piece. Use the move tool, click once I get the purple circle, click and drag it. Again, I should start seeing dotted lines. Hopefully I don't want black, I want green. So you'll see if I drag it leftwards, I get to a point where it's green dotted lines. While it's green dotted lines, I hold down the shift key, and you'll see now that it's constrained along the green axis no matter what I do. Keep holding down the shift key, still holding down the left mouse button. I drag it towards the blue mega piece. Once I get fairly close, I'm going to want to let go of the left mouse button, and then, again, like I've been saying just now, then I let go of the shift key. At this point, all three pieces should be at the same level, and if we measure horizontally now, they should all fit within about 7 cubes of each other. 1, 2, 3, sort of a fourth one in the gap, 5, 6, 7. So this is good to go. We've minimized the amount of overhang or cantilever of the orientation of these pieces, sort of vertically if you will, and we've also made them all fit within about a 7 by 7 block area, so they're all going to print well. Now at this point I'm going to want to save the file, and I probably should have been saving all this time, so I'm going to have to add something into the beginning of the video to talk about saving regularly. So at this point I'll do File, Save, and the best rule of thumb is to be saving on a regular fashion. So pick a place. Your net files is a really good place because it's backed up, but for now I'll just do it to my desktop, and I'll just give a name, Cube, maybe Project. You should be using your name, so maybe Cube, your last name at least, for your net ID for your file. And in this case, this was the first one I finally saved, so it's going to be version 1 SKP for a SketchUp file. So you want to do that every once in a while, and I would use File, Save As, and when you made some more changes, now say version 2 or version 3 or something like that. So in effect what you're doing is you're getting multiple versions of this. So in case you make a mistake at some point, you can always go back to one of the earlier versions of the file and recover. This is generally a good practice even if you're doing a paper using Microsoft Word or something like that. It's good to keep versions of your files. And so the same holds true for SketchUp. So we now have a saved version of this file, and we have it such that they're all arranged appropriately. Now, there's also something called reduction. Reduction is a case where these, at least within the SketchUp virtual world, these pieces all fit. We know they fit because we assembled this megacube originally, but the problem is we don't have, in reality, if you actually fabricated these with machinery and we made them to the exacting distances, the problem is there would still be friction. Even if our manufacturing process could make exactly smooth surfaces, whatever material we make them out of will have a little bit of friction, and they're not going to fit very well. It's even going to be worse on something like a 3D printer where there's some inaccuracies, some tolerance, if you will, of the printer. So in effect, what we would do on a print job like this is we would need to reduce the faces, meaning we eat a little way into the center of each of these cubes where they're going to be touching other components. So where the red and the green touch, we would take each of those sets of faces and reduce them a little bit. And the reason why we do this is so they will fit when we actually print them on a 3D printer. So for these cubes being about 10 millimeters on a side, we need about a 0.2 millimeter reduction along each face. So where they touch, we would be reducing the green and the red faces each by about 0.2 millimeters. So that's about 0.4 millimeters total where each of these touches. So that's, you know, a few percent of reduction. And this is going to be the case for almost every kind of manufacturing process. If you've ever worked with screws and nuts, the nut that fits on a screw, technically the diameter of the nut is going to be larger than the diameter of the screw, and that's so they fit well. It's not going to be so large that they don't fit in each other, but there's going to be enough of a gap that you can freely move the screw and nut together. It's the same thing as evident here. So we're going to take care of this for you because in some future version of this project, we won't need to be doing this at all because the software is competent to be able to make these reductions. So for this semester at least, fall 2013, you will not need to be doing these reductions. However, I will need you to do one more thing, and that is to go back to your cubes and look at what are going to be the interior surfaces for your cube. If you had colored all of your mega pieces like I had, you'll need to go to the internal ones and color them slightly on the one face that is interior. And this will just help us in identifying your interior faces. This one is kind of obvious because we know that, for example, the red one, this set of six cubes here along the bottom with the one hidden one are all on an outer face. Basically, it's kind of like we've eliminated all the possibilities, and we know that the main part of this cube, the assembly of smaller cubes, must be upwards from where the red one is. We also know this to be the fact because we actually had rotated the red one 90 degrees to the right to actually fit the way it is. But just to help make this easier for the people who will be doing the printing with you, what I'd like you to do is select each of the smaller groups of cubes, double click on it so you're editing it, then select the face that is on the interior face and color it some other color. Let's say white, for example, and just color the one white. Then do the select tool, finish, go to another cube, again select the internal face and paint it white. Go bucket tool, paint it white. And do this for all the interior faces. I won't waste your time and do it all here, but just to kind of give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Select all of the interior faces, select this one, and paint it white. Okay. And we'll also do, we would have to do this face here, or let's get the selection tool so you can see better. This face, this face, this face, these two faces, and then even that one right there. So on this red mega piece, I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to paint white. Once I have all the interior faces done on the red, I would then do the green and the blue. Once those are all done, then I'm going to save a final version of the file. You want to have your name or net ID on it, and you're going to want to say final version within the file name. And that's going to be the file that you send as part of your project. So I hope you've had a good time following this tutorial. I'm sure it's taken a number of pauses and rewinds, but I look forward to seeing everyone's cubes. Thank you and have a great day.